Hey guys, how's it going? It's Brian. So as you can see, I have all my LMGs lined up here. And that's not actually exactly what we're going to be talking about, but today we're going to talk about NIMH batteries. Do these still have a place in Airsoft? So this may be a relic that some of you may have never even seen before. So NIMH batteries were used mostly back in probably 2010 and prior in the Airsoft community, before LiPo or Li-Poly batteries took over as the dominant source of power for AEGs. But prior to that, you had NIMH and also NiCad batteries, and they came in two configurations. They came in usually 8.4 volts and 9.6 volts, and I think occasionally you might see a 10.1 for a really high output RPM AEG setup. But normally most Airsoft guns would come stock with a little dinky 8.4, 1100 mAh battery. And then, most people would get rid of them. They were very susceptible to the temperature outside, and they produced a very low rate of fire and a very low trigger response. Most people would upgrade to these, which were the 9.6, which gave you a higher rate of fire. I don't know if they gave you a snappier trigger response compared to the 8.4, but they definitely gave you a higher rate of fire. And then LiPos came around, and you stopped seeing these, and it got to the point where Airsoft manufacturers didn't even include batteries with Airsoft guns anymore 90% of the time. But I saw an Airsoft video, and I forget who posted it, and they basically, it was like, what makes me cringe when I see it in the Airsoft community, and it was like people using NiCad or NIMH batteries instead of LiPos in 2023. Well, I am someone who uses a 9.6 NIMH battery in all my LMG setups, and here's why. Now, there are a few reasons, and there are pros and cons to it. Obviously, with all my rifles, I will use a LiPo battery, but with all my LMGs, I mostly use this guy for them. And again, here's why. So let's go over the pros and cons. So the pros of a LiPo battery is that you have a snappier trigger response. That's the first thing. That's an advantage over using an NIMH battery. With an 11.1, you have a very snappy trigger response, and even the 7.4 and 7.2s, you're going to have a better trigger response than you would with an 8.4 NIMH. But with an LMG, you're not really worried about trigger response. You're not worried about trigger response because you're using this on full auto by default. You're using it for sustained fire. So you're pulling the trigger and holding it down for 3 to, 8 seconds for a 3 to 8 second burst. So the trigger response isn't as vital or important as it would be with a rifle. Now, people might say, okay, Brian, so what? Why not have that snappier trigger response? Well, because there's a trade-off there. Obviously, a LiPo gives you a snappier trigger response, but there's a cost to it. If your gun doesn't have the proper internals, meaning a MOSFET, then you can, burn your trigger contacts, and your internals by default are just going to be put under a lot more stress. And obviously with an LMG setup, regardless of the gearbox, it's because you're using it for sustained fire, your gearbox is going to be under a lot more stress than it would be with a rifle. So that's why I use an NIMH in that regard, because if I can mitigate another variable that's going to cause more stress beyond just the fact that I'm just holding the trigger down and it's constantly spitting out BBs, then I'm going to do it. And with this 400 mAh battery, that's a 9.6, I get that. So it has all these, I've used it in my G&P Stoner 63. I've used it in my A&K M249. And I've also used it in my Classic Army MK46. And it gives a healthy rate of fire that's not too slow and is plenty fast. And I don't have to worry as much about the internals being burnt to shit. And some people may say, well, okay, but also there is the aspect of how consistent it's discharging that power and transferring it to the gun. That is true. A LiPo is superior at maintaining a consistent discharge rate. But, and again, this is an anecdotal experience, with this 4000 mAh battery, I have never had an issue with the rate at the, RPM of the gun fluctuating or slowing down. I've never actually played a game where I got this to a low point where the battery was almost spent as far as storage goes. So that's another thing. I would say that if you're going to use an NIMH, you should use one that is 2200 or more. This is a 4000 mAh NIMH battery that gives you plenty of juice. I've used it for a 36-hour milsim op in Georgia with the Stoner 63, and I probably, each box mag holds 1,500 rounds, and I probably spent about 6,000 rounds of ammo throughout the whole op, if not a little more. And I didn't even get to the halfway point. It constantly responded and fired and didn't give me any issues. So I think that you can use this without worrying about the fluctuating discharge rate as long as you have enough storage in the battery. So that's part of it. Again, there are still pros and cons, but I feel like just saying, oh, there's no place for them anymore is not entirely true. It's a very niche point, but there are applications where an NIMH battery is more practical than a LiPo in 2023. That's just my opinion. Let me know if you also use these batteries still, or if you think they're just a waste of time and money. But that's my 2 cents. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.